I think equity, I think a lot of NGOs are struggling to figure out how to, climate-focused NGOs are struggling to figure out how to bring equity and justice into what they do. Certainly a lot of the mainstream old environmental NGOs. I think most companies, they're doing stuff on climate, it's about their own operations. Sometimes it addresses some of the injustices that are caused by their operations, often not. They might be using 100% clean energy, but that's done with wind farms hundreds of miles away. Meanwhile, the coal plant next door that maybe is connected to the grid is still a big problem. So equity is huge. The other thing, I guess the other point I would make is a lot of companies, and I actually see this as a flaw in the ESG and climate risk frameworks today, they end up focusing companies on the risk to them and the damage they cause directly. And the natural response is to analyze your own risk, often to lowball it because there's a lot we don't know. It's the tail risks that are probably going to bite us all, and those are really hard to take into account. And then show how you're mitigating or dealing with your risks, what your business continuity plans are, and so on. And then to deal with your own operations by buying clean energy and investing in offsets and energy efficiency and whatever's needed to negate your own emissions. It is clear after the last 15, 20 years that kind of voluntary action or even required action focus on companies' own individual operations is not driving the systemic change we need at the speed we need it. We need to cut emissions in half by 2030. That's 8% a year. We're not going to get there by simply requiring more companies to disclose, make some net zero commitments, meet those commitments largely through offsets, which is what most of them will do. It's in the short term. And most of those offsets will be of dubious quality. And if that's the path we go down, we'll wake up in 5 years and have a big oh shit moment. What we need is public policy.
There is actually a way, though, in which disclosure can help in this regard, and it's kind of a sneaky thing. But one of the things that we've started warning our clients about, and I think is going to become more prevalent as a potential corporate risk that companies will face, real litigation risk around, is not being consistent, right? So you say one thing in your sustainability report, but then all of your political contributions and your lobbying efforts point in the opposite direction. And as the SEC continues to demand higher and higher levels of transparency, not just around climate change and ESG issues, but also potentially around political and lobbying contributions, that is coming. That is the next thing. I think it's going to back some folks into a corner. And while perhaps we'd hope that everyone would be a true believer, I think, to the extent we can't have that, I think disclosure can play a vital role, but agree with everything that Bill said with respect to boardroom education. I think that's something that Maggie and I have done a lot of in this space for this reason. And I can say we get far different reactions now than we did even 2 years ago.
I was just kind of thinking a little bit about there's so many different boards that are represented here from different parts of the world, and of course, our home state of California. And I was just thinking about, as we went on our journey at Ben & Jerry's, I've served on the board for about 8 years, and we're a unique board in that we have 92 legally binding provisions. With the exit of the company that created the board itself as a part of a sales agreement that governs the social, economic, and quality mission of the company, and sort of the board's stewardship of some of those important principles. And in that journey, one of the things that I found that was most helpful is some of the civil rights leaders would say, you don't know until you go, or you don't know that you owe until you go. So one of the things we went down to do is we met with some of the leaders like John Lewis and sat down, at his feet and kind of asked him about, before he passed, of course, about, how we could be a contributing company to the civil rights movement. And as a result, one of the things we did is launch an empowerment flavor, and through, a massive conference with Harry Belafonte that brought, tens of thousands of young people out to learn about exercising their right to vote in Atlanta, throughout the election cycle, and sort of building a stronger participation among young people in some of these things. Going down to meet with the Bucket Brigade in New Orleans and Cancer Alley down there, and spending some time with the people who are taking air samples and fighting against the companies that were polluting their communities and causing higher rates of miscarriages and other types of terrible outcomes, and working alongside of those communities. And again, they are the heroes in the process and that we go through, but how can we empower communities that are working on that? I think the final place that we've spent some time in the country is Alabama, as a leadership team, and some of our board members spending time with Mother's Day is coming up. You may have seen that, particularly for those of you that are involved in biomedical devices and sciences, the mothers of gynecology, there'll be a kind of push on that around Mother's Day. The Black women slaves that were experimented on, that laid the foundation to innovations like the pap smear and other aspects that were non-consensual experimentations of Dr. Simmons and others, and helping to honor their contributions to science, so that they aren't missed in the narrative, so that many of us can know that that's an important thing. And now many pharmaceutical companies are working really, really hard to get inclusive medical trials, where in the past, of course it was non-consensual, but it's worth honoring those that have contributed significantly at this time of year. So I just wanted to paint a couple different windows of pictures for those of you that are in different sectors and struggling with some of these intersectional issues of both climate and racial justice.